I'd now like to call on Mr. Bill Webb to offer his welcome to country. Thank you, Bill.
Good morning. Welcome, we say Kaya. Kaya ni Wadandi Nyunga Bugra Kechiwangi. Means welcome to the land of Wadandi people in our language. We follow the forest trails to the sea, so we're ocean people. And our main totem is the Yonga, the thing that jumps around in your paddock now and then. Of course, we have our individual names. My Aboriginal name is Borong Walga, Bigger Eagle, the Wedge-tailed eagle. My grandmother named me that because I was up in the clouds. But in the prophecies, it said there will be the man that will come to this land one day that will shape and change the recognition of himself. And he's not a sharer, not a carer, and he'll never ever put back the things that he's damaged. And overnight, he'll turn the place into a desert. So over the 200 years of occupation of what we call the barbaric invasion, is adding a third more desert to Australia as well. They said we were terra nullius and like we run around nomadic, you know, with hardly any brain. I always say that no, we were millennium geared environmental scientists. We knew how to coexist with this planet. And of course, King George back then, he said when they came to these places is to offer 2 to 3% to the indigenous people of utilizing their resources. And of course, that never took place. And of course, from the first tree that was fallen in Ludlow, if we had 3% of that, Aboriginal people would not be living in poverty. We'd be in Dalkeith. Annoying the hell out of them. But it took away our dream and our participation to this land and all our spiritual connections. And that's the most important thing for us, is going back to those places and showing respect. I grew up at a Ramada resort until I was 13 years old. Before it was there in a bag and tin hut. So we're doing a lot of music at the moment as well. And one of the songs I wrote is that we lived in a bag and tin hut by the edge of the bay. And we'd go and visit our sacred site and come back to the bay. So from there, I think, we've had to adapt and change as well. But we live in two worlds. And our world is still part of the missing. And we have to sort of adjust and stuff. But also, I've recently been back at the War Dance Centre and I wanted another vision for it to make it as a healing place and healing for younger Aboriginal generations and also for any other ethnic groups as well. My dad, he was like a visionary. He was like a Nostradamus. He said, you watching the future, boy? He said, all those younger generations, he said, you keep teaching all those children well. He said, because they'll band together sooner or later and they'll form their own governance. And I said, oh, like Liberal and Labor. He said, no, there won't be anything like that, boy. He said, we need to teach them well. He said, because what's going on now is that the whole mighty race for the whole dollar and stuff like that and the destruction of our land and everything. He said, they'll band together and they'll be conscious. They'll become a conscious society of how they can gain together. There's no ignorance of racism and that they will be able to go back and they'll be able to leave their future generations a beautiful footprint for the future. That was our role in the society, was to make sure that everything was intact and had that spiritual connections to it. And so that we can pass on to our future generations so that they can respect and absolutely respect of what this place was. This was one of the most pristine places. And especially the Wannerap area, there was hundreds and hundreds of Aboriginal peoples lived through there. The French were here in 1802 and we had Madame Beauvai's collection of the expedition and Lesueur's artwork is probably right near the gates of Wannerap House, and his sketch looks down through the forest. And he said, as far as the eye could see, there was dwelling after dwelling after dwelling. meaning that there was a very a beautiful big society that were, because that was to us as well. As I get a bit older, I'm still pretty fit at the moment, but as I get older, that was a retirement place because there were food was all there. So when you get older, you'd remain there. So it's like an old people's home, and in the corner of Dunsborough as well. And I researched that when the two frigates, they missed Augusta and they realised that they'd gone too far, so they had to come back. When they first dropped the anchors, it was probably right where the Swan wreck is when I did the reconnaissance in the 27-metre channel. Then they rowed ashore and rowed down through Dunsborough, and they seen all the spot fires in the corner of Dunsborough at the head of the estuary. And so that they rowed all the way through towards Bustleton and come back the next day. And then they had to get across to the cleared land because what Matthew Flinders, I think it was, he navigated way out to sea. And they found out from him that there was a ridge, the Darling Scarp, but there was another ridge, the Cape to Cape region, indicating there must be a big bay. And of course they came and they seen it. And of course, when the English got here, they were hell bent to come down to the parklanded area, which is the city of Wannerup, our city. And of course, we know of all the barbaric and the massacres and killings around this area. Some of those untold stories from my family really turned your stomach. And we know it was on a larger scale, Wannerup. My grandmother, she was about 12 years old at the time. I did 4.5 years in mental health, and you can be 6 years old and you'll always remember something like that. And of course, the denial nowadays, but I always say that, no, you wrote the history down. All it is that we're telling our story now. And there's two sides to a story, and the barbaricness of what happened up there. But also we researched that in 1857, on the 25th of March, over 550 in Coromant Bay. In the early 1900s, 350 men, women, and children over the cliffs of Valley de Fontaine. There was only about 4 or 5 families left. I think the decimation of us was probably well over 90% of my people. So we still struggle today to try and have some sort of commonality of understanding that we need to progress. Within the native title deal we have something like 20,000 hectares given back. I want to return to the mission days. Those sort of places out now with technology and of course the power and stuff and solar panels, we can go and make our own communities and start to practice and live off the land like we used to, and to be a help. And we're on a program as well. David Attenborough said that by 2030 in the Northern Hemisphere, the species will decline. The United Nations is saying by 2050, it's all over. And Jeff Bezos says that the next world war will be fought for food. We are number 5 of the 13 microvirus hotspots on the planet. And it's crucial that we come together for our younger generations and to regenerate and to be able to live off this land. So that's my role. Like my dad said, you'll think you retire, boy. I mean, he said, you make sure you teach all those children well in the future so that they can band together. And I guess last of our elders, we're here to help and support. So the Ward End Centre, I'd like to turn it around, more education of environments. And we're already starting to link up with all the wheat belt area as well, and a lot of the farms right across. We know how to go back to that bush. It's all there. But nowadays with the technology, we don't have to walk around and grab it from here and there. We can actually start a farm of the salt bush or something. And you should try the salt bush. You fry it and put in that piece of fish. Beautiful. But I hope you have a lovely day and your conference. And for goodbye, we say Moonyini. So, and as well say Morianti Kukuri Brooklyn. We may see you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that welcome to country, Bill, and the education of. Oh, sorry. education of us and your people is important. I would now like to introduce the Honourable Alana McTiernan. She's going to provide, or she has provided a short video presentation. She's the Minister for Regional Development, Agriculture and Food, Hydrogen Industry and the member for the Southwest region. And she sends her apologies as she could not attend in person. However, she would like to provide this message.
Hi, fantastic to be here with the City of Busselton and all of the good folk of the Southwest that are interested in the development and progress of this great region. And of course, we celebrate being on Yunga land at our end here at Wajak land, and down there Wadandi land. Can I acknowledge Nola Marino, MP, Member for Forest, Nick Bellier, the Chair of the Southwest Development Commission, and Mayor Grant Headley from the City, and all of the fellow speakers and guests that are there today. Look, really big thanks to the City of Busselton showing leadership and pulling together this forum. From Bunbury to Collie to Busselton and beyond, we have been making significant progress in diversifying the economies and the potential of the regions. We've been working hard to stimulate economic activity and to secure long-term prosperity for our regions across the state, but in particular in the Southwest. And we are delivering wins from large-scale critical regional economic infrastructure projects to attracting game-changing projects and helping the diversification and expansion of small and medium businesses. And of course, the one massive investment that really was still celebrating finally getting a payload on is the Busselton Airport and the landing of those three passenger flights direct from Melbourne each week. Now, as you know, this is a project between the state and the city that has really been potentially a massive game changer for the region, allowing us to avoid the triangulation with Perth and directing people directly into Busselton, Margaret River, and the amazing holiday destination that is. Also, I noted on that first flight, it enabled lots of people wanting to visit family and friends in the Southwest. Again, avoid the triangulation. And of course, it's also been a massive boom for residents across the Southwest who can avoid that trip to Perth when they want to go and visit family and friends, and God forbid, some of the tourist destinations in the eastern states, or to see a Dockers win. So we've achieved this through a productive, if somewhat robust, collaboration between state government through the Southwest Development Commission, Tourism WA, and the City of Busselton. All up, we have invested to date $47 million into this project. Now, we are committed to bedding this down, and we have undertaken that the second quarter of next year, where we've got at least a year's data on flights behind us, to have a look at what might be needed for the terminal development into the future. In the meantime, I'm pleased to be able to announce that today I have signed off on an additional $1 million investment to the Southwest, through the Southwest Development Commission, to help the Tourism Association make the improvements to the facilities at the terminal, the baggage handling facilities, the car parking and the terminal size. So we're really keen to make sure this works, and we are very confident that into the long term, this will be seen to be a very great investment. And of course, it's not all about the airport. We are investing in a whole raft of other opportunities in the city and across the region. We have committed $9.5 million towards the planned, a significant planned expansion of the Busselton Jetty. And through Jackie Jarvis, we have been working with the Tourism Association to show that we're very flexible in our support for this project. And of course, we've been investing in many other areas. Of course, it's really important. The wine industry is of incredible importance to the region, not only as an agricultural export, but of course, the very industry underpins much of the tourism and lifestyle that Busselton and the Southwest has on offer. So we have a $6 million wine industry partnership that is really focusing on building the resilience to climate change and resilience to the very complex geopolitical market shifts that seem to be such a feature of the world over the last 5 years. And of course, at the same time, in addition to that, our fantastic DPIRD staff, led by Richard Fennessy, are doing critical work in ensuring that we're developing new wine grape varieties to meet the changing climate in the Southwest. And that allows me to segue more into other strategies that we're taking to deal with climate change and decarbonisation. This week, the Premier announced that we will be bringing the end to coal-fired power in 2030 so that we can secure an energy system in the Southwest that is economically and environmentally sustainable. For the past 5 years, we have worked on a just transition in Collie and have invested $115 million to enable a reinvention of the town's major tourism facilities, the West Track Autonomous Training Centre, Australia's first graphite manufacturing facility, and a very significant medicinal cannabis pharmaceutical facility, just to name a few. And yesterday, we announced a further over $500 million that will be dedicated to ensuring that we have put in place a just transition. There will be an incredible future for this whole region as we work to deliver a sustainability and a low carbon Swiss, which can feed into the promotion of the entire region. So obviously, job people and skilled people are a big issue all over Australia and all over Western Australia, and of course, critically in the Southwest. We have got numerous schemes that we are continuing to work on. Our regional workers travel and accommodation support scheme has that we put in place for the agriculture sector has now been expanded to hospitality and tourism, and that has really attracted thousands of people to the regions through the generous subsidies that are on offer for accommodation and travel. Backpackers and working holiday makers are now eligible for that assistance. I think of great interest is we've got 2.4 million to attract international students to live, work and study in regional WA. International workers are a great source of labour in many sectors. We've got $4.9 million to expand the Job Skills Centre. We're spending in Collie, we're spending 113 million on reducing Tafe fees across regional WA, really encouraging young people to take up TAFE programs. And we're investing $10 million to support new construction apprenticeships. So we've got massive funds that are available, an industry investment attraction fund of 180 million, 100 million for industrial land development that will unlock private sector investment, and $48 million for our regional connectivity. So through a variety of our other grants, the regional development grants helping small and medium-sized businesses, value add, agriculture investment grants, our agri-food, food and beverage vouchers, and many more. We are seeing great take-up from businesses in the Southwest. And of course, we have a variety of funding for events. And we know that the city of Busselton is keen to be known as the events capital of WA. And so the way in which we've been able to assist with Cabin Fever, Busselton, Jetty Swim and the Southwest Craft Beer Festival and Xventure Dunsborough is demonstration of our preparedness to really be working with your fabulous region to maximise opportunities. So we see in the Southwest, it is growing, population's growing, it's attracting people and business because of its special assets. And we want to work with you to keep building on the region's strength, to continue to unlock its potential, but at the same time, recognising the importance that we protect those values, which has made it such an attractive place to so many to make their home and to visit. So thank you for the opportunity to provide this message. Sorry I could not be there in person, but I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I would now like to call on Nola Marino, the Assistant Shadow Minister for Education, member for South West, to introduce us to our inaugural event. Thank you.
How about I stand over here? Because I don't think you're going to see me if I stand behind that. So look, I will stand over here. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, great. Look, good morning. Good morning. That's great, and I'm really pleased that you're here. I'm delighted to be here with you, but I'm so pleased that you've shown up. And that's a really good thing, Grant, for you and the City of Busselton and RDA and of course Southwest Development and Alana in her words, that you're all here. And there was a famous person who said that the world is actually run by people who show up. And you've shown up today. And for those of you who are small businesses here, or those of you who've got plans to get into something new and innovative and hear what's been said today, I'm delighted that you're here. And I acknowledge that if you're in small business, the fact that you're here means that someone else is having to run your small business and that comes at a cost. So I want to acknowledge you all for being here and acknowledge the traditional owners. And of course, I really want to acknowledge the initiative of the City of Busselton, the RDA and Southwest Development, in putting this together, the opportunity for you to come together, but also to look at what's next. I'm pleased that you're open to what's going to be offered today by the various speakers. the open mind, the prepared to look and think outside what you're already doing. Now, we heard a bit about diversity. This is already one of the most diverse regions in Australia. As an electorate for me to represent in Canberra, it is one of the most diverse. So everything from mining and resources. Now, you know, some of this we take for granted. The best, you know, when you look at the spodumene that comes out of Greenbushes, the best hard rock lithium in significant quantities that we've got. Albemarle, now at Kemerton, taking advantage of that. And the opportunities over time about what might come out of battery production and also managing waste in that space. So there's a lot going on. So mining, resource manufacturing, agriculture, forestry, okay, agriculture and horticulture, some of the best quality food in the world produced here. And I'm very proud, Grant, as a dairy farmer, that you've actually got the cows. This is some of the best quality milk in the world. At the top, Paul, as it should be, because it is a top quality product that brings great opportunity. And that you look at the focus on food now and what we can offer, not just here, but we feel Australian farmers produce enough for 25 million Australians, but 60 million people around the world. What an effort. And it's something that's taken for granted. You see what's happening in the Ukraine. We don't take food for granted, or the fact that we're filling gaps in markets right now. And that's being done by our producers from our region and around Australia. So you be proud of that. And not only do we have those areas of forestry, fisheries, but also tourism. We're going to hear a bit about that today. And retail, construction. And then two areas that we're seeing more and more about, health services. And of course, into the vibrant, which I call down here, the vibrant creative sector. Going to hear about that today. So, but with all of that comes opportunity, but it comes back to you as to whether you take or make or create opportunity out of what we've got and what is yet ahead. So that's, for those of you who've shown up today, I hope that's what you make of this. We've seen net regional migration into regional Australia. As you, Charles, would know, on the RDA, I was previously the Assistant Minister for Regional Development. And during COVID, the 53 RDAs that I worked with, we got together 3 times a week during COVID, then once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, right through until the election. What that did for us as a government during COVID is feed directly the information that was coming from right around regional Australia, where the dollars come from, where that key economic growth comes from, right back into the government to help make good decisions. So never underestimate the importance of your voices across the board and what that has brought in the decisions we've made. But if the top sectors are financial services and mining, number 3 and growing, the fastest growing, is digital technology. So what a great opportunity to live and work here and be able to be active in that field. So we have negotiated a number of free trade agreements. I hope you think domestically and internationally. There'll be speakers that take you through the how-to. But we've got free trade agreements with so many countries now that the opportunities are there, not just domestically and in your local market, but internationally as well. So as you think through the opportunities, consider where can you fit, what is your inherent natural competitive advantage, and how can you take advantage of that? Which is what I said, we've got new opportunities in the civil space sector, put a lot of resources into this. And I've been desperately working to try to get business, industry and other in the Southwest to understand the opportunity in defence procurement, defence supply and manufacturing ongoing, but also that workforce that is so important in the space of defence and defence capability. Critical sector for us, but I also see a lot of opportunity, and it's not necessarily popular, but in waste management. You know, that whole circular economy and the management of waste. I think we've got a lot to offer in our Southwest as well. So, can I encourage you today to be aggressive listeners? And that means, even when you're not really interested, keep your ears open and just take a few notes. This is like putting money in the bank. You may not use the information you hear today immediately, But I hope you keep it in your mind and think, how can I use this? And when can I bring it out when I need it? Because that's the opportunity that the speakers today will represent. We've got a designated migration agreement in the Southwest that allows 200 additional places for workers outside the existing skills list. Did that not long before the election. That is an opportunity in specific areas that I'd encourage you to have a look at if you need them. I also hope you look at, when you see today and see what opportunities and you're thinking, what's there for me, my business, my future, and what I could do, what are the potential collaborations between you to achieve the best that you can? And today, make sure you introduce yourself to everyone who's here and say, so you know what they've got to offer and how could you work with that if you need to, and where to go even to ask a question about something that they know more about than you do. There are no dumb questions. The dumb question is the one you don't know the answer to and you don't choose to ask it. Okay? So please make sure you do that today. There are challenges, yes, we understand that challenges always bring opportunity. And it's up to us to make those, make the opportunities, not expect them to sit. That's what we are here in the Southwest. We can do, we get on with it. And we don't look at the problem, we look at the opportunity in the solution. So I hope that's what this is for you today. An opportunity that you choose to take and make yourself, for your community, for your business, for the broader regional development opportunities. And I encourage you to keep that open mind. Look, I know you're particularly busy. And if you're in small business and medium business here, you are particularly busy. But no matter how busy you are, being the farmer that I am, and coming from a transport and logistics family, I can tell you it's always much better to wear out than rust out. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Noel. You always speak so well, and listening to your presentation, and it's a bit like our new economic development plan. You know, our vision in Busselton is where lifestyle, employment, and opportunity meet. And you spoke of those words quite often, and I think that a lot of the things you were talking about then could just about be pulled straight out of our plan. I would now like to. I've lost a page. Yep, we've got the mayor next to introduce our new economic development strategy. And before he comes up, there's a short presentation that will be played on the screen. Thank you.
We're certainly lucky to live where we do, and I'll pay my respects as well to the traditional custodians of the land on which we all live, work and prosper, the Wardandi people of the Noongar Nation. Welcome. The City of Busselton is delighted to host this inaugural event, and I would like, firstly, because often it's left to the end of the day, to thank Danelle Dowding and the other staff involved in putting today together. And in what's been a difficult time to organise anything, we have seen, although there's some more certainty recently, we don't worry about cancellation at the last minute quite so much now, but it is still a challenge. And as well, trying to get you, the people in business in the City of Busselton and throughout the region, to be able to come along in your busy schedules is always a challenge, but we hope that you get some value out of this inaugural event. I'd like to acknowledge Noel Marino, MP, Member for Forest, Assistant Shadow Member for Minister for Education now, and Noel has long been an advocate for education in the regions throughout her portfolios and while representing Forest, and also a strong advocate for our regions and will continue to do so as we work with the new government in Canberra. Some important functions of the local government are facilitating business and community information flow, providing collaborative opportunities, and we had an excellent breakfast this morning with Fun WA, and thank you for making the time to come down today and returning to your roots, Glenn and your team. That was wonderful to hear about venture capital and the opportunities often sadly lost to Western Australia that we hope to see, and there's some fantastic innovative people all through our regions. Also, advocacy for our community needs and promoting our opportunities. This forum is an excellent platform to achieve all of this. Over the last decade, our economic development strategy focused on transformative infrastructure investment, our town centres and foreshores, a new township of Vass, almost 5,000 people in a township that virtually didn't exist 10 years ago. Developing key economic assets in our upgraded airport, and we now have those flights coming in and out to Melbourne as a first step and beyond. And under construction, our new Performing Arts Convention and Conference Centre. I'm pleased to launch our new economic development strategy as endorsed by Council only last week, so hot off the press, formally. Our new strategy is high level. It is agile, it is a living document, and it outlines our 5-year focus on supporting business and the community. It has key focus on supporting and growing our business sector in collaboration with key stakeholders, diversifying our industries by fostering emerging sectors in aviation, technology, and the creative industries, deepening existing strength sectors in retail, tourism and agriculture, and of course viticulture, we all love a wine, by value adding and attracting new public and private investment. Encouraging industry-aligned training and employment opportunities to support our workforce, the development of it, and better engaging our youth. And as Nola mentioned, we now have the Dharma, which hopefully will be able to assist our businesses in the current struggle for manpower. Delivering placemaking and lifestyle infrastructure that enables positive lifestyle and well-being. The benefit to us of attracting the resource industry to be source communities has been enormously beneficial in the growth of the City of Busselton. When I arrived here 20 years ago, yes, I'm not a local, the population was around 20,000. When I got on council 12 years ago, it was 30. We're now over 42,000 people in the City of Busselton. And we need to create the opportunities for businesses to flourish and people to be employed in our local area. But that local area now extends beyond the City of Busselton and into the southwest region. A strong region is a strong City of Busselton. And we also work collaboratively with our fellow local governments in the southwest, Regional Development Australia and the South West Development Commission to ensure that the City of Busselton is well placed to take advantage of opportunities in the South West. The implementation of our economic development strategy includes that it is an agile framework for actions that deliver key programs and projects to achieve the goals of the strategy. And we look forward to continue our strong collaborative partnerships with many of you here as we deliver this work over the next 5 years. I'll just digress for a moment because quite often people say, why does the local government get involved? What do you know about business? And I just very quickly scrolled down the 9 councillors or 8 councillors and myself that sit, and our backgrounds, and my Deputy Mayor Paul Carter, background in agribusiness and selling tractors at the moment. We have a Microsoft engineer, airport manager, people who are in farming, retail, banking, tourism backgrounds. We have a former chair of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry who ran her own business in paramedic training. IT consultant for the National Library. Someone who ran a stonemason company for 20 years and is now working in the care sector, as well as being a police officer. So we have a diverse range, wasn't me, a diverse range of backgrounds on our council, but we certainly rely on input from our business sector to help us in developing, creating, and implementing our economic development strategy for the betterment of our whole local economy. I thank you for today, and like Nola, I encourage you to be active listeners and participants in what we have today. It's certainly a two-way presentation. Thank you for coming and making the time in your busy schedules to be with us today. Thank you.
Okay, before we dive into the sessions, we're now going to check into our interactive Slido platform. So if you open slido.com on your, well, I don't know, can they scan that? Can you scan that from where you are? Or yeah, apparently you can. Should be able to scan that from where you are. And then we're going to do a simple challenge or task. This is basically an interactive, probably should do mine as well, interactive, what do you call them? Application app that you can ask questions and provide feedback to questions that may be posed. So I should have done mine as well. Sorry, there's a code you need to enter once you're in there. Oh, does it? Oh, there you go. Oh, mine's saying unable to install. So, Danelle, what were we going to do with? Have you been able to get yours to work, Grant? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Wish I was on the top line. So there's some very organised people there. I haven't been able to enter mine, but it'd be down the bottom, I think. I have too many filters that put things out of my way before I have a chance to read them. All right. So what we're going to do, so we'll be using this throughout the day to interact with you and get your feedback and that sort of thing. So what we're going to do now is dive into the program. Now, our first session is the economic session. We do have such full days presentations. Will you forgive me if I don't provide a formal introduction to all of our speakers? Their bios have been included in the brochure that's sitting on your table. We will have a Q&A session at the end of each panelist section. So please note any questions or comments that you have along the way, and get ready to step up to the mic at the Q&A section towards the end. The first speaker joining us from Zoom is Dr. Kim Horton. He's the Chief Economist with the Regional Institute of Australia, who is zooming in to provide an overview of economics, looking at regional recovery, outlook and trends. Over to Kim.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. Lovely to hear the Minister and see Shadow Minister Marino. It's obviously got a lot of energy in the room, which is great. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I was last there in 2019 for a leadership program, and I love Busselton and I love the hinterland up there too. But I'm coming today from Ngunnawal country in chilly Canberra. I've got a short presentation to run with you. What I've been asked to do is really share with you what's been going on, what the regional recovery looks like around Australia. And the point about that is Charles is going to follow me and talk more about what's happening locally. But I want to try and put your sort of current business environment in a bit of a wider context. I think there are some good things going on in the rest of regional Australia which will benefit you, but there's also going to be quite a lot of competition for skills and accommodation, which will be affecting you and your businesses and Busselton, I'm completely sure. So there are sort of 4 broad things I want to touch on. Just share with you, and Shadow Minister Marino mentioned this too, people have really changed their movement patterns around regional Australia. Housing's really tight, jobs are plentiful, and what do we think about these? And it was interesting to hear that the Minister's sort of program for investment and building that sense of livability and industry capability in the Southwest. What can we do about regionalising growth across WA so it's becoming more decentralised? I'm currently the Chief Economist with an organisation called the Regional Australia Institute. We're an independent, not-for-profit think tank. We've just celebrated a bit over 10 years of history. And our main role is to do good research and policy advocacy on behalf of people in regional Australia. And we've had quite a range of work going on, and I'll draw quite heavily on some of that in my sort of summary this morning. Big picture stuff, what COVID's done to regional Australia has been pretty significant. We really weren't sure 2 years ago where it was going to take us, and it's been a pretty wild ride. On the left-hand side of that, if you can read it, you can see that we've actually had a pattern in Australia of generally people preferring to move from the cities to the regions than the other way around. Most industrialised countries have this sort of sense of urbanisation, people flocking to the cities. We don't actually see that in Australia. I think, to be fair, though, when people are leaving the cities, some of them are going far inland and remote. A lot of them are going to those places within 2 to 3 hours drive of our capitals, and they're seeing a lot of growth. And certainly you've seen a lot of growth in Busselton over the last 20 years, according to what the Mayor was saying a moment ago. So that pattern's been in place. COVID has really pushed it, though. It's clearly the city lockdowns really changed those movement patterns. People stopped actually moving from the regions back to the cities. There's normally a 2-way flow, and that was one of the big changes that's really driven this housing price. I'll touch on that in a minute. The ability, of course, to work remotely has allowed many people, particularly white-collar professionals, to take their jobs with them and make a move from the city to the region and keep their jobs with them. That's eased their cost of living, and they get away from the congestion in the cities. Down the bottom there, you'll see a little bit about our Move to More campaign, which is designed to appeal to people in the largest 4 capitals, including Perth, to get them to think about making a move to the regions and taking up a regional job. When we did some market research around that about 18 months ago, when the campaign was getting going, the really satisfying thing for us was that the city folks know the deal. They know what they're living with, and they know what they're looking for in a regional place. On the closest to that little image of Move to More, you can see there's the top push factors. They're the things that people in the cities are not liking about their city environment. things we're not surprised about: traffic congestion, stress and anxiety, and the cost of living. In the middle, though, are the pull factors, the things that people living in the cities would like about living in a regional setting. Now, the nice thing for us is these are all quite well established. So connecting with the natural environment, improved sense of well-being for self and family, and the affordability of regional locations. And the nice thing for us is those pull factors are actually rated more highly than the push factors. So we don't need to really sell that package of regional living. That's kind of quite well understood. What we need to do is make it easy for people to move and make sure that we have that sort of sense of livability in our regions that will sort of help people to realise those expectations that they have. This is about I wouldn't be an economist without putting up a few wiggly charts. This is about how COVID has changed our overall movement patterns. We do a study every quarter with the Commonwealth Bank. The Commonwealth Bank shares with us where their customers have moved from out of the cities and where they've moved to. And we've got another one of these coming out next week, which will be particularly interesting. But this one shows us that during the period of COVID, these wiggly lines shifted. The top wiggly line, the light blue, is people moving from capitals to regions. So that's kicked up during COVID. So there's more people going from the capitals to the region. But equally important is the line at the bottom, the blue line, is that people moving from regions to capitals actually dropped. Now, what that meant was, of course, that flow kind of really changed, that the magnitude of the flow changed in both directions. People not leaving regions meant that they weren't leaving their houses, and they weren't coming up for rent, and they weren't coming up for sale. That's really driven this house price squeeze. It's not just the desirability of regions as a place to move to, it's the desirability of regions as a place to stay in, and those flows haven't been returning back to the cities anywhere near as much as they were pre-COVID. CoreLogic, the housing analysts, tell us that the average stock on market in regional Australia is about 43% below the long-term average during COVID. So only about almost half the stock of properties for sale in regional markets over the last 2 years, at the same time as we've had this increased interest in moving to a regional place. That's what's really put pressure on our housing markets. You combine that with low interest rates and bam, away you go. People willing to pay a little bit more for that high amenity rural lifestyle that they've been looking for. A little bit about what that means for the Southwest. So when we look at our regional movers index for the Southwest, Perth's a bit of an anomaly. It's the only city to have seen net inflows. All the other capitals have seen net outflows and increasing net outflows to regions. Perth's starting to draw people back in as that economic recovery starts to materialise in Perth. But of the 6 local government areas in Western Australia with the highest rate of inflows changing over 2020 to 2021, 4 of those are in the Southwest. And we look at Caffel, Augusta, Margaret River, Bunbury and Busselton. The second column there is the calendar year 21 versus calendar year 2020. So 11% more inflows from capitals to Busselton over that 12-month period. 14% for Bunbury, 18% for Augusta Margaret River, and 19% for Caffel. So, you know, when the Mayor talks about those growth rates, a significant portion of those are people coming from the capital cities, and that's accelerated in that last in these last 2 years. So you'll be feeling that in your communities, there's no doubt. The third column there actually shows what's happened in the last quarter of 2021. And for most of our places in regional Australia, they actually dipped. So part of this, I think, is around sheer housing availability, just not being there anymore, and the house prices going up quite significantly through the second half of 2021. So late in 2021, there was generally a downward trend quarter to quarter. Things were trending down. So those big increases over the year really happened in the first half of 2021. That's the kind of stuff that you'll be seeing in your communities. What this brings is kind of a triple challenge for regional Australia, very much evident in the Southwest. Housing is tight. You know, the regional house price story, it's not just for you in the Southwest. The house price growth that we've seen really has been a regional story rather than a metro story. In the 2 years to April this year, so the core sort of COVID period, regional house prices grew over 40%, capitals prices grew about 20%, and they're already turning down. So the price growth really is a regional story. Workforce is a big challenge. We've got over 84,000 jobs currently advertised in regional Australia, and I'll touch on how that looks in the Southwest in a minute. And then all this comes back to this sort of livability and attractiveness. What is it about your region that's going to keep drawing people and businesses in. Now, this is some of our housing work. I'm not going to touch on this because my colleague Dewa Hopkins is going to be talking to you about this in a little while. We've really tried to unpack what's happening across housing markets in regional Australia, and she'll tell you more about where the Southwest fits and what it means for the kind of responses that you need to accelerate your housing market development in the Southwest. Workforce has seen really significant growth across the whole country in regional Australia. This wiggly line is about the number of job vacancies just in regional Australia over a decade. It's a nice long wiggly line. On the left-hand side, you'll see the mining boom. We touched about 60,000 jobs at the peak of the mining boom, and a lot of those were in the mining regions of WA and Queensland, and a lot of the jobs were mining-related professions and trades. Everything fell away in the middle of this, 2015, 2016, things were growing fairly slowly. This is across the country as a whole. I'll show you the Southwest in a minute. Big drop on the right-hand side just in early 2020, which was the COVID. Everybody stopped hiring in March and April 2020. But then look at the growth. Look at the growth, the acceleration in job advertising across regional Australia over the last 2 years. It's been phenomenal. It's really outpaced the cities. And we've now got a new high of over 84,000 jobs. Now, the interesting thing about those jobs is they're no longer just in the mining regions, and they're no longer just in the mining occupations. They're a much broader base. And I'll show you what's happening in the Southwest. Similar pattern. Look at that big peak. You had a lot of jobs being advertised in the Southwest during the peak of the mining boom. Quite significant, much more prominent than in the national picture. But even so, you're higher now than you were then, with about 1,600 jobs advertised earlier this year. We'll have new data out on that next week. So again, very robust business conditions. Employers are really keen to hire. You look at the sort of the gradient on that wiggly line after the COVID dip. Very sharp rises. Employers are confident. Generally, growing seasons have been pretty good. The tourism collapse that we all expected in 2020 didn't really materialise for a lot of places. So there's a lot more business confidence, I think, in the Southwest than people might have expected a couple of years ago. Now, this is a super wiggly line. And it shows that same figures in terms of the advertised job growth, but by occupational level. And it shows the strong growth in skilled trades and professions that are driving job demand in the Southwest overall. The blue line is managers, the green line is technical and trades. And you can see that during the mining boom, they were the two professions being most advertised. But as you come across to the right-hand side more recently, green's still there, so we've still got a lot of demand for technical and trade workers, but the next biggest group, that dark blue line, is professionals. And the big growth from over the last 2 years in the Southwest has been demand for professionals. So your labour force is becoming much more sophisticated. Your employers are becoming much more sophisticated. And when Nolan Marino talks about education, it really is about getting that message through to the kids, through to the families, and through to the education providers post-school, so that they recognise that this region is no longer a region of labourers and sort of skilled trades. It's actually moving very much down that more sophisticated employment path. Now, that's a good thing for the region because that'll lift average wages. It's a challenge though, because most parts of regional Australia are showing similar kinds of patterns, not always as pronounced to this, but there's a massive demand across all of regional Australia for skilled trades and professions. So you're going to be competing with employers in lots of different places, which means that that sort of lifestyle and attractiveness package that you have is really going to be put to the test. Because if you're a person with some of those skills, you've got a lot of choices about where you can work. So this regional attractiveness thing that we're working on here, there's an image there of our livability toolkit, things you can look at within your own community to assess your sort of strengths and weaknesses and understand better how to pitch that to an outside audience to bring in that sort of skilled labour that you need. And the last little bit I want to share with you on that, again, this is big picture stuff, but this is where the Institute is trying to help you. As well as that Move to More campaign, we have a regionalisation campaign which we're finalising. We'll be launching at our summit in September, which really is trying to ensure that there's a sort of national recognition that regions have a really big role to play in our economic recovery. And part of that is standing up for growth and for opportunities in regional Australia. We have some corporate partners that are happy to put their hands up and be part of this campaign. We're looking to governments to be on board. We're looking for regional businesses and regional organisations like the RDA and like the Development Commission to be on board. Clearly, that's their bread and butter, and if you're a regional business, this is your bread and butter too. But we want to sort of make a really strong sort of community-wide social campaign that says to all governments, there is no risk to you in supporting regional growth. In fact, there's only upside. So if you're sitting around the cabinet table wondering if you're going to spend a bit of money this way or that way, always go regional, because the benefits to the community will be really positive. Just a couple of sort of wrap-up points. What does all this mean? And I'll hand over to Charles to talk about the local issues. Clearly, you're a really highly desirable region. You've got very high rates of population growth, but your housing costs are rising. And I think you're actually on your median price, I think Dewa told me, is a little above Perth already. So that's going to make it harder for those lower income workers to stay. You can't let those essential workers be priced out. If a barista can't afford to live in Busselton, everybody suffers. So you've got to work out how to manage that affordability of accommodation and availability, particularly of rentals, in a region that's showing such high rates of growth and showing such high rates of desirability from across the board. If you don't have these lower income workers able to live and work in the community, that really sort of negates that. They're often the glue that holds the community together. They're not just our hospitality workers, but they're also our education support workers, our health support workers, and our age support workers. And we need those so that we can maintain that overall livability package. Lastly, you've got the attractiveness there already. You've got those high rates of population flows. Can you continue, I think the Mayor mentioned this too, can you continue to diversify the regional economies and jobs pathways so that the city itself can be a bit more self-reliant? You've clearly got the FIFO thing is very strong, but both supplying labour up into the northern parts of WA. I mean, no doubt too that the southwest where you are is a great place to live long term if you're doing long distance FIFO. But what can you do about having the city become self-reliant? It's nice having that extra income and that desirability coming from those long distance workers, but what can you do to make the city more self-reliant, increase the self-reliance and the diversification of the city's own economy? It sounded like there are quite a few things going on. Noel and Marina talked about them, so did the Minister, and those are exactly the kind of things I think that the community needs to focus on from my perspective, looking at this thing across the nation as a whole. So I'll wrap it up there and look forward to hearing from Charles about the local aspects.
Thank you, Kim. I'm not sure if you're going to hold on for the Q&A session, but
Yes,
we might not actually have any time for it because we're already running over. So
No, I'll stick around.
I'll just pass you over to Charles Jenkins.
Okay, good morning. Which buttons do I press? That one? The big one. Okay, cool. Thank you. Right, good morning. I'm probably the only one here that's pleased that Miles Pollard isn't here, on the basis that he actually coached me in public speaking, and if I make a real hash of this, he'd be all over me. So, quick acknowledgement. Macro season, thanks to Bill. I acknowledge that we are on saltwater people's land, the Wurundjeri people. The artwork there actually was done by the kids from the Jitty Jitty School, and each one represents the 6 seasons. And anybody who wants to know more, there's some stuff left outside. The other thing is data, mainly from REMPlan, and that plugs into ABS, ABR, Tourism Research Australia, BITAP. I won't bore you to death with the acronyms. Okay, so I'm here just to tell you basically about the Southwest. I'll try and stand here, but I've got a habit of I walk and talk. Enabling infrastructure is basically our access to markets. Access to markets is the key pillar of regional development. If you don't have access to markets, you don't have, you can't turn your comparative advantage into a competitive advantage. So here we've got lots of good stuff. The ball's coming in. The ball gives Boston and the Capes, it gives you that magic kind of 3-hour rule, you know, like Melbourne, Phillip Island. If you can knock off work early on a Friday and get here in 3 hours and have dinner here, it's a real bonus, and you will attract more and more people and more money for the local economy. The other one is up the road, Port of Bunbury is going very, very well. They're about to break another record. This year, they've broken a record every year for more than a century, apart from 2008. I think they still broke a record during COVID, actually, for throughput at the port. And finally, that was just for Naomi Searle, that it flew in. Can't go past mentioning the airport. Alana McTurnan did actually omit to say that the airport's got a 2,540-meter runway because the federal government paid for it. And that will give us reach to an international market in the future, and that's where we will be going. Also, in terms of opportunity, the land around the airport, greenfield site, you can build big sheds to park very big jets in. So, economy. This is output only. It's based on input-output modeling, and that's the output for the whole region. We've got to look at it, Boston's not an island, it works within the Southwest, and I'll touch on what's happening in the neighborhood. The huge number is that nominal GRP has increased 91.1% since 2018. That is massive. What we really should be doing as well is looking at opportunities to avoid leakage. Leakage is when we get products in from the outside to process on the inside. And we say to ourselves why we're not doing that. And if we look at propulsive sectors, and without boring you too much with regional development theory, they're things that link forwards and backwards in business. So for example, we're in a wine region, where the box is coming from, where the bottle's coming from, who prints the labels, who puts the wine in the bottle. Well, that's actually done quite a bit around here. But there's so many linkages where other businesses could be involved or startup opportunities. Jobs. We've not quite returned, well, when I wrote this last week, it said we hadn't returned to pre-COVID levels. And the numbers I had last week were that Augusta and Margaret River was at 3.4% unemployment, Capel 3.3%, and the Southwest average was 4.7%. The numbers we got on Wednesday were bigger picture. They don't drill down till next week. And they were figures that had shown a more than 2% fall in unemployment rate in Western Australia, and that will be reflected here because unemployment here before Wednesday's figure was extremely low. I think we were at 3.9-ish, something like that, yeah. We'll get the numbers next week. All I can say to you is that the numbers are at a 50-year low. Regionally, in terms of output, construction is king. Unfortunately, not in local house building. Manufacturing is number 2 by value. Output and jobs don't necessarily align. So the largest sector by output is construction, but the largest employer by employment is actually retail. Boston and Bunbury have got massive retail sectors, and that's because those centers pull everyone in from the hinterland, so those communities fight way above their weight in terms of that level of employment. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about tourism. Obviously, it's important to the region. And yep, there we go. So tourism's the 3rd leading employer. The standout fact about tourism in this region is that it's in the top 6 of tourism dependent regions. In other words, the amount of jobs that depend on tourism are absolutely critical to this region. Tourism Research Australia has as 6th, 7th. At the same time, a lot of those retail jobs are because of holidaymakers, and the actual rental, hiring and real estate category for this area is also very high, again, possibly due to holidaymakers. Community. Of the 183,000 or so people in the Southwest, 110,000 are on the Boston-Bunbury axis. We've got very strong growth, and sustainable population is another pillar of regional development. Boston's got actually a lot more young people than the average in the 5 to 19 age group. The 20 to 29 late gens, early Zs disappear. They come back when they're 40, 49, and Kim Horton would tell you a lot about this if you look at some REA numbers about people returning. And the local demographic figures show significantly more people in the 60+ age group. So we've got this kind of wine glass demographic, which is really quite appropriate for our region. Community, and again, this will link with Kim. What? I did this, I've timed this tons of times, it works. Trust me, Paul. Well-being is a measure of relative disadvantage. That's what Kim was talking about with the pull factor. There is a happiness index in the world. The happiness index puts Australia 11th. All the Scandis are at the top, and like Afghanistan's down the bottom. The socioeconomic indices for area scores, or CEFA, we usually use the acronym, has Busselton sandwiched between Capel and Augusta Margaret River, and they are the top 3 CEFA scores in the Southwest. Well-being here is extremely high. I'll skip some more data because Paul's giving me a look. Almost every household around here, people do have money, they've got lots of cars and things. For the most part, people come to Busselton and don't leave, they stay. It's the most popular local government in the Southwest for people choosing to stay put and not move on. It's also got the highest levels of outright home ownership. Doesn't mean to say you can put the rates up. Going full circle, we've got to ask, is ignorance bliss? So we're all very happy here, but gee, we're not very well educated. Postgraduate degree qualifications are 1/3 of those across the state. Grad dips and bachelor degrees are also down, but certificates are actually really high. And that perhaps reflects our trades, and FIFO people is about 1,300. And finally, environment. We are an Ockerbill. That's an old climatically buffered infertile landscape, which gives us our diversity. Bill mentioned earlier that we are listed on as a world biodiversity hotspot, and that's the vast Wonnerup area, and we're on Ramsar listed wetlands. Climate change. Of the 5 threatened WA coastal areas identified in a CoreLogic study released about 3 months ago, the top 3 were in Busselton. This reflects sea level rises, which are eustatic and isostatic. I'll bore you with that later. Saltwater intrusion in the aquifer is a growing problem. Our rainfall has declined significantly since 1975. At the same time, our population is growing. Now, rather than get all doom and gloom about this, I want to look at this as saying managing climate issues are an absolute amazing opportunity for the region. I don't know why our universities don't have study hubs here to look at it, because we really are the canary in the cage. And finally, I've got, whoops, where are we at? There we go. I've got copies, a few copies of this and lots of this on thumbsticks, which has got a lot more data in it for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. And just to the other speakers, if I slowly start to walk up to the stage, just take that as a bit of a hint that I'm trying to encourage things to progress a little bit faster. I think what we might do is maybe just have a couple of questions, hopefully just directed to Kim. And if you've got a question of Charles, maybe you can ask Charles during the break, if I can take that liberty. But is there any questions of Kim? No? Sorry. Yeah, we can get an email. And also these presentations will be made available for those who wish to get access to them. Again, Kim is happy to stay till the end. Thanks, Kim. Okay, session 2, jobs, skills and housing. And we know that that's two critical two critical issues in our region are housing and skilled and unskilled labour. And we've gathered a expert panel of people to talk to us about that. First, a little change of the program. We're joined by Dr. Julie Boston, PhD, and I'll introduce her. She is the Academic Coordinator, Industry Partnership and Engagement at Edith Cowan University, who is presenting on behalf of Professor Kobe Rudd, who is unfortunately unable to attend. Julie is responsible for identifying and coordinating industry partnerships and engagement and enterprise-related programs that drive the ECU strategic priorities and relevant university performance targets. She is an award-winning educator and active researcher interested in providing the 21st century schools with learning environments. Welcome, Julie. I'll just note the time.
Yes. Please do, because I smashed my watch. I don't have a watch and I'm feeling really uncomfortable without a watch. Do you want to put a time on me? So good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Julie Boston. I won't go over my bio because you've just done that for me. Thank you. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you about building a future workforce. I'm actually representing Professor Kobe Rudd, so that's not my picture in there. Kobe is our wonderful Deputy Vice Chancellor for Regional Futures and Vice President. And as you've heard, she's an apology for not being able to attend this morning. My talk will be through the lens of education, my background, and Kobe and I agreed that my focus will be very much on building the aspiration side of building a sustainable workforce. So let me set the scene a little. The future workforce scene, ways of working have really changed for young people, resulting from the unique amalgamations of automation, globalization, and technology-enabled collaboration. We now know the most in-demand occupations or specialties didn't exist 10 years ago. Let me set the education scene for you here in the Southwest. It's home to a fair number of formal education amenities, including 113 primary schools, 26 high schools, Edith Cowan University, as well as the South Regional Tafe. Here in the city of Busselton, that actually includes 8 primary schools and 3 high schools. As you know, ECU's got the Southwest Bunbury campus, and it is in fact the largest regional university campus in the state. And ECU Southwest also offers 4 learning hubs throughout the region. But overall, as has been pointed out, there is actually a relatively low level of educational attainment for the region. And whether this is actual or perceived, a limited career opportunities typify the region, particularly employment opportunities for youth, sadly, along with many other regional communities. An educated workforce will no doubt be a critical part of developing and sustaining socioeconomic growth for the entire Southwest region. However, building a sustainable workforce will require the input of many stakeholders and therefore a systemic approach. And it won't be an easy task. But what can be done to build a sustainable workforce? Building aspiration is fundamental. Research is telling us that building aspiration starts young, in fact, primary school. We must not leave those career chats or school presentations and university campus tours till mid to late high school. The sooner, the better. There are extracurricular programs out there, such as the Children's University, a global equity program for kids between 7 and 14 years of age. This is a program that aims to foster a love of learning and to nurture aspirations. It works by building strong connections between students, importantly their families, and community learning destinations, such as museums, observatories, and libraries. This program offers plenty of opportunities as well for the children and their families to engage in activities on university campuses, helping to break down a barrier and the perceptions that some families do have about university. And it helps to open up a world of possibilities for these children. Currently, this program operates in 6 Australian states, involves 330 schools, and has 38,000 child members. ECU recognised the need to build aspirations with primary school aged children. So actually established the first children's university entity here in WA in 2017. In fact, it was actually Professor Rudd that set up ECU for WA's first children's university program. UWA also think it's a fabulous program and joined us in 2020 in delivering this program across WA. Professor Rudd and I are now actively working right here in the Southwest to nurture the aspirations and strengthen the educational engagement of regional Western Australian kids. And we're developing a Southwest arm of the Children's University. I'm pleased to share with you that we've actually had our first Southwest school join, and that's Australian Primary School. And two of your fabulous educational attractions here in the Southwest, that is the Bustleton Jetty Observatory, and as recently as this week, the Dolphin Discovery Centre, which I'll be going to a little bit later today, are now both part of this program as formal learning destinations. But programs such as CU, as an example, need your advocacy and funding to be sustainable. Recently, the Department of Training and Workforce also announced a terrific new initiative called the Year Nines. It's a career taster program for Year Nines, allowing these young people to explore and learn from employers about careers and study pathways. Good on you, fabulous initiative. Career advice in schools really does need to start sooner, so students don't prematurely rule out choices or pathways. We also need to remove the myth that students need to push towards ATAR as the only route to university. What else can be done to support building a sustainable workforce? What approaches should schools be taking to better prepare young people for the modern workforce? We know that approximately 75% of the fastest growing careers will require science, technology, engineering, and maths, in other words, STEM skills. However, STEM performance in Australian schools has stalled and declined in some areas over the past 20 years. Specifically, demand for digital skills has increased massively too, as well as a strong signal from industry that they need young people with critical thinking skills and who are confident problem solvers. The Australian curriculum very recently has been refined, allowing teachers, thankfully, to focus on developing those core general capabilities. Whilst we can't know what technologies today young people are going to utilise in their future roles, we do know that having strong information communication technology skills is going to be really important for them in order to be able to adapt and be agile in a fast changing environment. At all levels of schooling, schools should prioritise tools and technologies that enable students to think critically, a skill that is inevitably developed when students are provided with a well-rounded, solid STEM education. Teaching enterprise skills too will also be important for developing a modern workforce, and a strong STEM education will also help to build those very skills. Industries everywhere are demanding young people with the confidence to ask the hard questions, take risks, learn through experimentation, and learn from their mistakes. What else could we do in the region to support building a future workforce? You need to consider skilling solutions. So how can you help? Consider involving your organisation by either participating directly in or sponsoring skilling programs in partnership with Edith Cowan University and South Regional Tafe. This involvement can assist to upskill the development of local high school students or tertiary students, and then to ensure they are more career ready. ECU Southwest has a long history of preparing new teachers with the practical skills needed to be classroom ready. In response to the federal government's Job Ready program, ECU established a new program called Partners in Literacy and Numeracy, or PLAN, to cut it short. It's a service learning approach to assisting local schools. And at the same time, the pre-service teachers work with the children in those schools to help develop two critical skills, literacy and numeracy. There are currently 4 regional primary schools involved and 2 regional high schools participating in this very worthy skilling program. We'd love to have more. Another area that can assist in terms of skilling solutions is getting involved in taking on interns. Interns, it's a fabulous approach to getting real work practice and as much of it as possible, whilst learning theory as part of their developing at university. Working with industry mentors really now is a core modern education practice and has also been shown to be highly effective at retaining the workforce. Consider reaching out to us regarding internships and placements. And finally, what else could be done? The region must be able to offer its residents lifelong learning opportunities. Again, this is where the regional learning hubs come into play. ECU will work in partnership with local organisations to offer the Busselton community a range of educational opportunities, including short courses, as well as award level qualifications. These learning hubs are about improving access to and success at higher education, along with providing short courses or micro-credentials to support individuals to reach their employment and career goals. It's going to be especially important that short courses are designed to upskill local residents in areas of need, such as those skills now in high demand across those STEM fields. As published as recently as this week in The Australian, I hear, the skills gap is one of the most urgent issues requiring attention. The federal government is signalling the need for an education and skills plan that systematically links universities, Tafe and the vet sector along with skilled migration. This presents an exciting opportunity for us all to work together to provide relevant point of need opportunities to address those knowledge gaps and increase diversification in the current workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I will now introduce Darshi Ganison, the Managing Director, Southwest Regional Tafe, to provide insight into their current programs and initiatives. Welcome, Darshi.
I'm actually going to stand here because I'm vertically challenged and you won't be able to see me if I'm standing there. So good morning and thank you to the organisers of this event for putting together today one of important dialogue. So I think I'm meant to press the green button, correct? Yep. I'll just kick start it by just saying that last year we launched our new strategic plan for 2022 to 2024. Purpose is really to build our community today for tomorrow. And there's a couple of themes that I'm going to talk through today on that strategic plan. But I guess a bit about South Regional Tafe, for those that may not know, we cover pretty much the southern part of Western Australia. So from Bunbury all the way to Esperance, inland to Narrabeen. But we also have a campus in Busselton and Margaret River. That's a bit of a snapshot about looking through the rear view lens for 2021. Last year, we put through an unprecedented number of our students. We enrolled close to 10,000 students and we saw a 23% increase in apprenticeships, a 15% increase in traineeships. We engaged a total of over 1,500 new apprentices in trades such as automotive, electrotechnology, commercial cookery, parks and gardens. Over 500 trainees in early childhood and care sectors, process plant operation, IT, and we're seeing an increase in agricultural-based traineeships as well. And we also put through about 500 pre-apps, and we're also seeing an increased number of women taking up traineeships and training in non-traditional trades, and primarily in with the larger companies. And obviously, well, from our perspective, we think that is a result of many of those trades becoming more technologically advanced. There's some of our popular courses, or the top 10 courses for the Southwest. We delivered 240 qualifications over 33 industry areas last year, and that's pretty much the top 10 or 11 in Southwest. I'll just skip through it because I know I've got 10 minutes. One of our strategic themes is student-centred, the right skills at the right time. I guess what we're seeing is that our learners, the 10,000 or so that we trained last year, are becoming more complex. They want an enhanced experience from the get-go. They want flexibility in the way that they access training. They don't always want to come on campus. They want to learn where they can learn. And we're also seeing that we need to provide more targeted support in terms of language literacy and numeracy, and also more support on not just their physical safety, but on their psychosocial side as well. So it's a big beast for a TAFE college to have to deal with all of that, But we are working on these. We haven't got it perfect, but we are getting there, and we're getting a lot of support from the state government in that. We're also investing in new technologies. So just for this year, we've got an investment of $1.2 million in new automation and simulation equipment to support our automation delivery, our heavy haulage, and our nursing and aged care delivery. And some of that is directly at Busselton campus. We've got $9.9 million over 4 years for the whole sector. So South Regional is one Tafe, and there's 4 others, and we all work closely together on a lecturer industry placement program. What that means is that our students are being trained by lecturers who have been connected recently with industry, and they have got up-to-date understanding of current practice and industry standards, which we need to make sure that our students are actually being trained with relevance. And secondly, we need to do that because we've got some heavy regulations and compliance requirements. So the commitment of 9.9 million over 4 years is really useful across the sector. So this gives you a list. I guess the other thing is that as a result of needing to provide the right skills at the right time, we're also bringing on a whole raft of new programs. And these are some programs that we are currently either have brought on scope last year or are working towards bringing on scope this year as a direct result of what industry have said to us that they need. So that's a whole lot there, and I'll move on to the next question. Our next, another strategic theme for us is demand driven, and this is about supporting our industry, community and government priorities. So there's a whole raft of initiatives in there. And I guess what I want to point out here is that as a state and as a region, we've had historically the highest employment and participation rates in history at the moment. So in response to that, the way we deliver has to change. The way we deliver training needs us to be changing. So we are trying to be more agile and respond to training in the workplace. So what we're seeing is because of the low unemployment, an employer recruits, they've got staff, they've got workers. Now they want us to come into their work site and provide that training. So I guess what we're doing is working with the employers, whether it's a small or medium business enterprise or your large companies, and training the workforce in their space. And traineeships works really well there. Traineeships works well for small to medium business enterprises as well. But we're also needing to do more just-in-time training in the workplace. So I'll highlight a couple of success stories. So last year we graduated 21 Fortescue Metals accredited workers in trades such as transport mechanics, fabrication, electrical. Those 21 students were South Regional Tafe students, but they're up in the FMG site up north. Some of them might leave here and do the pathway. Another program we co-designed with industry last year was with Cape Care in Busselton. We co-designed a 12-month program to grow Cape Care's workforce in their work setting. Our students enrolled with us, got work placement with Cape Care Busselton. Cape Care pay the shift work for them, so they're also earning on the side. They're learning with us while simultaneously learning on the job and being trained by Cape Care as well. So it's really a win-win situation. Now, there's also what we're doing is a whole lot of, we've brought on scope, a whole lot of just-in-time training and skill sets in the areas that you can see under point 2. Drones pilot is one that's needed by a raft of industry, including the agriculture sector. I'll just talk about the workforce transition. So you would have seen the announcements earlier this week about colleagues. So South Regional Tafe is going to be the provider of the Job and Skill Centre, the largest for the whole state in Collie. We are heavily recruiting at the moment to fill those positions. And we're also the training transition provider for the forestry hub. And joined by colleagues of mine, also here today, who have focused on that. Sorry, in Capital. So that's the workforce transition, and a fair bit of work has been happening on that through the Just Transition plans. They've delivered to secondary schools. We've increased our delivery by, and we've been increased funding for it by 26% in the last 2 years. And we currently have 395 students enrolled in high demand areas in the southwest. That's 10 minutes for me. I've got 1 more minute. Okay. So that's I won't go into any more detail about that, but there's some of the things that we are currently doing. I'm happy for people to talk through. I might just mention one other really quick one, which is the Regional International Strategy. I'm just about to go offshore with our Minister for International Education to promote that, and that is 200 places for students to come to the regions to live, learn and work. We, as a provider, will connect these international students with the local employers, find employment for them. We need housing. That's where we look. And we've got any solutions, please come and see me. And the students will get $5,000 bursary. So that is a huge win for the region, one that I'm really proud to be promoting for the region with our Deputy Premier and Minister for International Education in a month's time, going offshore for that. But housing is a big thing. And I guess with many of these things, I guess the main thing I want to highlight is that, I won't go into that, that's just job ready programs that we're doing as well to tap into the youth unemployment. The main thing that we're seeing that's really different to the way we worked pre-COVID to now and with the tight employment market is that our solutions won't work unless we partner with community organisations or employers and industry. Gone are the days when we have a student coming in and it's a talk and talk. I better go. On campus, it is really about collaboration and partnership, and really welcome any feedback and any advice and any solutions that you may have for us. At Morning Tea, as I said, Kathy Kay, Director Training, is here with me, and Michael Brown, who works on the College Transition Program as well, is here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Darcy, and sorry for seeming pushy. I'll now welcome Marianne Baker, who is the Employment Facilitator for Southwest Local Jobs, who is going to give us an update on programs connecting employers and workers. Thank you.
Yes, I note, and I'm terrified. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I'd too like to acknowledge the land on which we're meeting here today, and from all the lands we come, and acknowledge the elders past and present and the emerging leaders we have in all the communities that we live, work and play. As introduced, I'm Marianne Baker. I'm the Employment Facilitator for the Australian Government here in the Southwest. Green button, is it? Yep. You ask every time. And I'm going to talk about one of our initiatives, one of many employment initiatives we have to support our job seeker who is in receipt of a benefit and is our next available workforce, and how we support those job seekers to be your next employee. But before I do, I just want to start with a little story, and I'll end the story and get back to it later in the talk. But I want to talk about when I turned 15. So I celebrated my 15th birthday like most would. There were presents, some sort of family event where some old auntie, squished my cheek and told me I was growing up really quickly. Birthday cake, dinner. And after dinner, my mother gently leant into me and whispered, "Tomorrow, go get a job." Now, unlike my own children, who I tried the same gig with, I wasn't offended and I didn't think my world had ended. I was actually excited because in my era, and I won't give away my age, it was a rite of passage. You turned 15, you could go get a job. So the next day, I jumped on my push bike, because that's also what we had to do. We had to ride our own bikes. And I took my extensive resume, which had my date of birth, my address, where I was educated, and that I liked camping, fishing, and cooking. So still to this day, I like those things. But that's all I had. And I'm from Bundaberg in Queensland, a small regional town, go the regions. And I walked the main street, a typical main street, dropped off my resume. And then I came across Best and Less. Now, best and less, I had a sudden thought. Nathan, who I go to school with, his dad manages best and less. So in I go, full of 15-year-old confidence and my extensive resume with so much experience. And I asked to speak to Mr. Stumbris. Now, Mr. Stumbris came down. I explained hurriedly that I went to school with Nathan and that I was looking for employment. And he put me through a math test that day, which was terrifying. I'm not a mathematician, go the economics people. And I got the job. But I'll get back to that story later on in the talk. So one of the initiatives is that from the Australian government is the Local Jobs Program. In response to COVID, the bushfires and the other natural disasters, the floods on the East Coast, the Australian government added an additional resource to the employment facilitator network, of the Local Jobs Program. It was to support the economic recovery in our communities. It was a $270+ million investment, and I'd like to actually take the moment to acknowledge Nola's support. She's been 100% behind us the whole time as we rolled this out in the Southwest. And it was expanded to 51 employment regions across Australia. So we're really serious about the impact that it could have. It runs through right till 2025 as well, which is a really key date because we can't often do things in 12 months. Sometimes we need longer. So this was a really key thing for us to be able to deliver over long term. The key elements of the program is that they would have an employment facilitator, myself. I'm also supported by a support officer in the Southwest. We have a task force which is made up of local key stakeholders that bring their industry knowledge to the group so we can be better informed to impact the jobs plan that we put in place. More than happy to talk to anyone who'd like to join that. We have a local recovery fund, which is we fund activities, employment activities that result in unemployed people gaining employment. And we also have a national priority funding pool, which we share across the nation around significant barriers to employment. So the idea of the program is to create place-based solutions. Because as Nola said before, she met with all of her RDAs 3 times a week during COVID. And while there were similar constraints, there would have been regional clusters that were experiencing the same things. So perhaps the Southwest and the Gippsland were experiencing the same thing. So it's how we could do a place-based respond to the Southwest needs. And as the economy was recovering from COVID-19, we really recognised that what we might have been strong for from a job seeker point of view previously may change, and we needed to adjust to that locally. We needed to identify local employment and training priorities, and by working with Tafe, we worked towards that on-the-ground responsive training response to what the employers currently need. The program objectives were to maximise the time out of work for our job seeker. So we wanted to know that a job seeker who had lost their job because of COVID or another natural disaster, that we could get them back into the market, because if they'd been in the labour market, they had skills and ability to return. It was also about connecting the greatest number of people to training that was available in the region. And that's why we work closely with our state colleagues as well. We supported local decision makers. That's what we do with our task force. And we enhance the coordination and linkages. What we do really well in the Southwest is we get on and get it done. And we actually underestimate the strength we have in the Southwest that we do that. And roles like myself are able to support that already high functioning network ability that you all have. So just to demonstrate, because I'm running out of time, these are a few of the local recovery fund projects that have been either all over or just completing or about to start. So we've done projects in civil construction, where that was our very, very first project. And I'm very proud to say that the Southwest was the first region in Australia to have a local recovery fund activity. That's right, Nola, we did it. And we're not competitive at all. So it's really it's humble that we stand before you and say this. But you know what? It wasn't because individuals were amazing. It's because together we get it done. Together we are ready to find the solution, and we come together really quickly. That resulted in 8 Aboriginal people gaining employment on the board project. So it's really significant. We also have just completed a Future Works program, which exposed job seekers to the agriculture and horticulture and viticulture industries, which are really important, especially viticulture, in my opinion. And what it did is we were finding that job seekers really didn't have a good understanding of what it meant to work on a farm. So we were taking them out on field trips and giving them appropriate training, and those outcomes are still coming through now. Local job marketplace is still underway. We have 4 more local delivered jobs fairs, which are really tiny. There's only about 12 employers there. So it's an opportunity. If you have vacancies coming up, come and let me know. We can talk about how we can support you there. And underway at the moment, we have an Aboriginal driver program, because licences remain one of the highest barriers to all of our job seekers, but particularly our Aboriginal job seekers. And we are just about to commence a training towards your future, which is about linking job seekers to training pathways to meet their aspirational needs, which we've heard about today. So back to my story. Why was it important that I knew as a 15-year-old that I had the name of someone to go and ask for a job? I didn't know it at the time, but I was using my network. I didn't know I had a network. I just knew I had a resume. But what's really important, and what we know for our young job seekers now, is they don't necessarily have a network. And if we look at the stats, and yes, for the economic people in the room, this doesn't add up to 100% because it's sourced from multiple areas and sometimes it crosses over, so don't count the data. But we know that here in the Southwest, 40% of our roles are filled by word of mouth, or if we term it differently, by networking. 40%. So that means if I own a truck driving company and I need a truck driver, I'm better off calling Dominique and saying, Dominique, I'm desperate. Who do you know? And she's like, oh, I don't know anyone. But I heard Charles has got a cousin that's just moved here and he's got a truck license. No worries. Hey, Charles, I heard you've got a cousin who's got a truck license. And he's like, yeah, I do. He's a good bloke. Let me, get him to give me a call. But that's a privilege. That's a privilege because I belong to a network I can lean into. So our job as business leaders, I'm a business owner myself. I have 4 people working for me. All of my employees have come to me by network. I don't know how to stop that. Yes, I do, that button. But what our job is as business owners is we need to loan our network to others. We need to loan our network to the Commonwealth Employment Service providers. So our 7,000 unemployed people on benefit in the Southwest at the moment can get assistance to get a job. And by loaning our network, we can also indirectly loan it to the young person who then will have the confidence to be able to walk in somewhere with a really dodgy resume like I had and be able to drop a name or have the confidence to come in. So have a look at that. As we talk about how to grow the economy of the Southwest, how to grow the economy of Busselton, let's also work out how we can grow that other amazing resource we have, which is our human resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Good little story either side of your presentation, so that was great. I'd now like to welcome Mr. Steve Lanier, Assistant Director, Business Industry and Regional Outreach from the Department of Home Affairs, to discuss working visa solutions and our regional Dharma. Started the 10 when she's great.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Steve Lanier. I am one of 3 business, industry and regional outreach officers based in Perth for the Department of Home Affairs. So my main role is to come out and inform and educate businesses, industry, etc., around the skilled migration program primarily, and how that program can be used to address skill shortages and labour shortages that we're experiencing at the moment. So look, I'll start by saying fairly bluntly, the skilled migration program is not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix all of the problems that we are experiencing at the moment with labour shortages and skill shortages. It is, however, a big tool in your arsenal as employers that you can use to fill those occupations that cannot be met by Australian domestic workers. So the migration program or skilled migration program is primarily based on the fact that Australian workers come first, but where business and employers have tested the labour market and been unable to source those workers, then the skilled migration program can bring in visa holders who are either onshore already or who may be offshore and being recruited from overseas. So the location of that person, whether they're here already or they're overseas, is fairly irrelevant. It's more about the skilled program itself. So I'm going to show my age a little bit here. When I was preparing this, I was thinking of the Talking Heads song Once in a Lifetime, and you'll see why. This graph is a very telling story about why we are experiencing critical labour shortages in both the Southwest, but across the country at the moment. We have the lowest net overseas migration, or NOM figures, that we have had since World War I. So you can see in that graph, that middle line is the median. We've had growth from pretty much World War II up to 2021. It went off the edge of a cliff in 2021 as a result of border closures due to COVID-19. The positive on that is we closed our international border in March 2021. We protected Australia and our public health from the ravages of COVID that took place around the world, in Europe, India, America. You've seen all that, the devastation that caused. We were largely spared from that because of good public health management. The flip side of that, however, is we saw a dramatic drop in net overseas migration over that period of time. So you can see the last time we had that level of negative migration was 1918-1919, World War I. It has been pretty much on a positive trajectory since World War II, with 2021 being the first year that we lost 88,000 people. So we went from a peak of around 240, 250,000 sort of 2020. And this is visitors, migrants, workers, etc., coming in, to a dramatic drop of negative 88,000 in 2021. And that was simply as a result of COVID. So that graph for me was really telling when I found that on the weekend from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It really tells a picture of why we are experiencing these acute labour shortages at the moment. So that's the bad news. What I really want to focus on today in the 10 minutes that I've got is focusing on practical solutions for employers here in the region, primarily focusing on the DAMA, or Designated Area Migration Agreement. This slide is my kind of go-to slide that I use when I'm talking about visa programs. I kind of broadly will classify it into people who are what I might describe as a walk-up start. They're already here, they already hold a visa, and you could potentially employ them straight away, by which I'm referring to primarily your backpackers or your working holiday makers. So that's the fifth one down, subclass 417 and 462. You'll hear me talk about numbers here. Those are your backpacker cohorts that largely went offshore during COVID. They are coming back onshore now. They are a walk-up start. A working holiday maker is basically somebody who has a 12-month visa, can work for whoever they want in whatever position they choose to. So if you are seeing backpackers or working holiday makers coming in and they're approaching you as employers, they are ready to go, pretty much. Likewise, you've got student visa holders. They're not listed on there, but that's a subclass 500. Student visa holders were primarily, well, before COVID, only allowed to work up to 20 hours a week while they were studying. We've increased that to 40 hours a week or full time, as long as they are still studying in their course. So students can pretty much work full time and study. That's another source of labour for you as well. The other one that's listed there below the 482 is a temporary graduate visa. TGV, or temporary graduates, they're students who've studied internationally here in Australia, and they are still on shore and they are looking for work in whatever position they choose to. The idea of the temp grad visa is basically for those students to stay on shore, build up their skills, build up their experience in their trade or profession that they've studied here in Australia, and continue to get a job and, you know, be sponsored by an employer and move towards permanent residence if they choose to do so. They can work for whoever they like in whatever job they choose to, be it an Uber driver, delivery driver, right up to, you know, engineer, management, accountant, whatever the case may be. It is entirely up to them. So that cohort is like what I would describe as your walk-up start. They are already here, they already have a visa, they're already ready to work for you. The two that I've highlighted, the 482 and the 494, for those of you at the back, I hope you can see that. Those are employer-sponsored visa programs. So they are directly sponsored by an employer for the visa holder to work with that business. Can I just get a show of hands? Who's familiar or who's currently sponsoring employers directly with the business? Yep, few, okay. Next question, who's familiar with the 457 program? which used to exist. Okay, yeah, most of the time when I go around to regions to talk about this stuff, people know about 457s. It ceased in 2017. 482 is basically a new and improved version of 457. So if you know about 457, 482, temporary skill shortage, that's the new version of it. 494, the bottom one that I've highlighted there, that's a fairly new visa that came into effect primarily for regions. It is very similar to the TSS visa. The difference being TSS allows up to 4 years, depending on the stream, either 2 or up to 4. The 494 visa, or skilled employer sponsored regional, directly working for a business sponsor, that's up to 5 years. So it allows you the opportunity to bring in that worker on a temporary basis, either 482, 494, and potentially move them into permanent residence once they've done 3 years working with you as an employer and doing the same job. So there is a permanent residence pathway. That's a key point, and I'll touch on that in the Dharma as well in a moment. That is really about both the attraction of those workers to the region to come and work here to fill those labour shortages and skills gaps, but primarily to retain them. So we want them to come here, but the big picture is we want them to stay, and we want them to bring their spouses and their kids and build the community. That's all part of, you know, the backstory behind the skilled migration program. It's not about necessarily just filling a skills gap right today, but it's about longer term workforce planning and making sure that there are permanent residence pathways available. And most migrants, if you say, I'm prepared to offer a permanent residence pathway, they will love you and they will work for you for 3 years and stay with you, because that's ultimately what they're after. I'm going to move on to talking finally just about the Dharma. And before I talk about this, I just want to acknowledge the hard work that has gone into preparing the designated area migration agreement for the Southwest. Minister Marino has been instrumental in that, as has Andre Schonfeld, the CEO of Shire of Dardanup, and the Bunbury Geograph and Southwest CCIs, as well as all of the 12 local government areas here in the Southwest. You guys are in a very fortunate position in that you are one of only 4 regions of WA that have a designated area migration agreement, which has been tailored and is a bespoke product to meet the labour needs of this region in the Southwest. The way it works, essentially it's a business sponsored program. So there are 56 occupations listed in the Dharma. The Shire of Dardanup is what's known as your designated area representative, or the DAR. So they are your first port of call or point of contact in terms of a business wanting to access semi-skilled or lower skilled or even permanent residence pathways for higher skilled workers under that Dharma program. Essentially on that slide, you can see that the first step in orange is DAR endorsement. What that refers to is you need to approach the Shire of Dardanup and say, I'm a business, or we are a business. We are a business operating and lawfully trading here in the Southwest region. It is only open to businesses who are working in the 12 LGAs covered in the Southwest. So if it's a Perth-based business, they can't access the Southwest Dharma. Other than Southwest, the only other regions that have Dharmas are the Goldfields. They've had it for about 3 or so years. Southwest, you guys got it at the start of this year, 1st of Jan 2022. More recently, the East Kimberley have had a Dharma for their region that came about in April, and most recently the Pilbara region have one as well. So the way it works is basically an employer approaches Shire of Dardanup and says, I'm trading in the area. I've tried to source local labour, domestic labour from the Australian labour market, been completely unsuccessful, unable to fill that job. Goes to the Shire of Dardanup as the DAR, seeks endorsement. Once that endorsement has been done, then it allows that business to lodge what's known as a labour agreement request through our IMI account. It's an online account through Home Affairs. That labour agreement takes the place of what would be known as a standard business sponsorship. It's free, whereas sponsorship costs around $300 to $400. Once that is done, then the business can then put forward nominations for the position or the positions that they're seeking to fill, where you are unable to source Australian workers. That nomination, or the nominations, are about the position, not about the visa holder. So that is the business saying, I've got, one enrolled nurse and one, practice manager, for example, or I've got 2 plant operators and one business manager that I need to fill. It can be one position, it can be multiple positions. Once that nomination is approved, then the visa applicant lodges the visa, either 482 or 494. And that visa is linked to that employer where they work for you for a period of 3 years. And after that, they have a pathway to permanent residence. So from the previous slide, 482 goes into a visa called 186, Employer Nomination Scheme, and the 494 visa, which is also temporary, that then goes into a 191 visa that comes into effect in November. So that's pretty much it for me. Happy to answer any questions later on. Come see me if you want some more specific details, but I hope that was some practical solutions for addressing labour shortages in the Southwest. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to have a couple of speakers talk about housing, which we know is a challenge with cost and supply at the moment. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Dewa Hopkins, Senior Economist for the Regional Institute Australia, to shed some light on some solutions unearthed in the Building the Good Life Regional House Report.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be part of the discussion and joining you virtually. And you know, thanks to the organisers. If I go over time, feel free to exercise that sort of prerogative there and just put me on mute. I'll try and keep to time. So I'll be sharing our research on regional housing with you all today. Yeah, so I suppose, you know, for us, the really strong feedback that we're getting from the regions is that, you know, that housing piece is really instrumental. It's really critical to enabling those growing opportunities that are really emerging and coming thick and fast in regions. So yeah, housing is a key challenge in that piece. So at the Institute, we have had a program of research into regional housing, and our research series is called Building the Good Life, and we've produced 2 key reports to date over the last 12 months. The first, and I'll be sharing just the details in broad terms of this research with you all. The first report that we produced was a discussion paper that really just set out what the current pressures in regional housing markets are, what those drivers are, and we provided initial foray into policy considerations to address these challenges and pressures, noting that regional Australia is diverse and so too are its housing markets. And in this paper, we identified 2 particular types of markets. Our second research report really developed this notion of the regions and their housing markets. And our colleagues at the University of South Australia, they developed a really neat data-driven typology of all of Australia's housing markets. And they found 5 distinct, predominantly regional housing markets. That really forms a very strong foundation for place-based responses, which is what we're very keen about at the Institute, because we know that regions are diverse and place-based responses are really appropriate. So what are these current pressures in regional housing? Our conclusion from our research is that the most acute challenge is in rental markets. So, you know, regional rental markets, they tend to be quite thin in general, but in the wake of COVID, that availability has just really been declining. As Kim mentioned, you know, there are these unique pressures that have sort of brought that to bear in more significance more recently. And what we're seeing is very tight rental markets, and that's pushing rental inflation, and it's very disruptive to local communities. And this is in contrast to capital city markets, where you would say that the real malaise in capital cities, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, it's in their purchase market. It's that affordability or lack of affordability in terms of those capital city price to income ratios. They've really just blown out of proportion. So in terms of what those pressures in rental markets look like, they're just about universal. So the tightness that you're experiencing in Busselton, you can see that that's reflected across the country, if not even more tight and more acute, particularly in the southeast of the country. So on the left here, you can just see the widespread nature of these tight vacancy rates, the number of LGAs, generally speaking, they're in the majority, if not total number of LGAs with tight vacancy rates. But regional WA has been shielded them from that to some extent And that goes to the very different experience of COVID and the effects of COVID in WA. Those tight vacancy rates, as Kim had talked about earlier, really go to those population dynamics and that fall in out availability of rental properties. Those rental properties just aren't coming up onto the market, and there wasn't very many of them in the first place. And I'm afraid to say that the situation in WA is starting to catch up with what's happening over in the east. Having said that, you know, there has been a lot of attention also on regional house prices, and those purchase markets, they are also under pressure. And you can see here that across the country, that regional housing price growth has been very strong. In annual terms, it's in the order of it's been in the order of 25% for quite some time now. And we know that incomes are just not keeping up with that. When people look at these, you know, sort of housing price league tables, often people are looking for, you know, where the strongest growth is. And, you know, if you're a regional person who owns a property, well, happy days, you've seen your equity really accumulate. But it is, you know, it's not sustainable, these very strong rates of growth. And I think actually, you know, looking at that situation in regional WA, having that more modest, well, I mean, 9% is a very reasonable rate of price growth. That's actually much more sustainable than what you're seeing in other states. So obviously, you know, all, you know, these pressures, they really beg the question of how did we get here? And Kim really spoke to those cyclical and macroeconomic drivers, those population dynamics, the economic recovery. And what I want to touch on today is the structural factors behind the pressure points that we're seeing. And so for us, you know, what is clear from our analysis is there's this widespread regional housing shortage, in that the supply of new dwellings is just not keeping up with the demand, that population growth. And that's what this chart here at the top highlights. Those dark blue bars, they show that supply over the long terms coming online. Those are building approvals in each year over the last nearly 2 decades. And you can see over the long term, that's a trend decline, despite regions' populations growing throughout that entire period. That growth rate there of that light blue line has been well above 0% for the duration of this period that we've highlighted here. And the only meaningful boosts to housing supply in the regions have come as a result of federal government stimulus. So the first homeowner boost, more recently home builder. So it's that to us speaks to there being this sort of underlying nascent demand that only gets realised thanks to government stimulus. You know, these figures here, they're obviously aggregated regional figures, and underneath this aggregate picture, there is diversity of markets and local shortages. The drivers of those local shortages are diverse. So, you know, when we go to what drives those structural challenges and those challenges in terms of getting that supply to market and speaking to that diversity of the local experience, in our first piece of research, we identified that 2 overall types of markets, so regional markets that are growing more quickly, their population is growing, and the constraints there and the structural challenges there are very traditional. You know, fast population growth has run up against constrained supply, and it goes to those issues about bringing that land to market and the role of infrastructure in activating that land and doing that in a timely way, and also providing a diverse mix of housing. There are also shortages in smaller markets, and we identified that the challenges there, they relate to access to finance, but I won't go into that today. And, you know, as I mentioned at the outset, our colleagues at the University of South Australia, they really developed this idea of the diversity of regional housing markets, and they developed a data-driven typology and came up with, across the country, 6 types of markets, 5 of which are predominantly regional. And they range from these, you know, small, low cost, you know, low population growth type of markets, right through to what we've called growth zone markets, where prices are much higher. These types of markets bear a greater resemblance to suburbs that you'd see in the capital cities. And the key for all of you guys there in Bustleton is that Bustleton fits within this coastal type of market. For us, it's pretty archetypal. These coastal markets, they're concentrated in the southwest of the state, but you'll also find them along the central coastline of Queensland. But having said that and harped on about the need to recognise the diversity of regional housing markets, we have concluded that all markets, irrespective of their type, really do need a more diverse mix of housing to cater for ageing populations, allowing people to age in place, to cater for those young professionals cycling in and out that you really do want to attract to your local communities, and also to provide that affordable housing, which I think will be important for Bustleton, given the pressures in your community and already where your housing prices are at. And so, yeah, here are the details in terms of what our analysis identifies Bustleton as in relation to other markets across the country. And it's this coastal market. You'll find that Bustleton shares market characteristics with 57 other LGAs. Prices are subject to sort of boom bust cycles, and those constraints on availability are really quite traditional. Out here what those responses are. And really, it's been touched upon today that the role of livability is really important. And that's really quite applicable when you look at the relationship between Bustleton and Perth and those housing prices, and the importance of keeping your local market affordable. And I think I will wrap up there. I do have some data on the Bustleton housing market, and I'm sure that you can see where exactly you guys are at. You'll be feeling the tightness in your market, that rental inflation and low vacancy rates, and also the purchase, the growth in housing prices in your local market. But feel free to access that data and those charts in the presentation offline. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Dewa. You'll be staying around for the Q&A? Yep, excellent. Thank you. I'll now introduce Andrew McRobert, Director of Business and Industry at the South West Development Commission, to give the state government perspective on housing. Thank you.
Thanks for that. This is my second public, or my first public speaking event since my daughter's wedding, and I'm quietly confident I'm going to be a bit more coherent today. So hi, and thanks to the city for the invitation to speak on what is probably one of the hottest topics, if not in the Southwest at the moment, regional housing supply. You've all seen the headlines over the past couple of years, the rental crisis, builders going under, skilled work and associated accommodation shortages, supply chain disruptions, significant increases in the cost of building materials and building delays. The reality is that there is a significant shortage of all accommodation types across the Southwest, and this is impacting families, individuals, industry and businesses. So what I talk today about is a more localised appreciation of regional housing supply and issues. Excuse my voice. Starting with the issues and then looking at some of the solutions that we are currently looking at and what government is doing in this space. So it's not just a local issue, it's one that's being seen internationally, as well as in other states and territories as per the RAI's stats and information. It's also an issue that's not solely the result of the current pandemic. Other factors include, and I'll give some local examples, material increases of 101% for timber, 63% for steel, and 250% for bricks. The construction workforce being at capacity, building approvals across the Southwest region being significantly higher from the previous financial years. Major projects including Albemarle's Kemerton plant, Talison's Greenbushes expansion and the Bunbury Outer Ring Road soaking up available rental properties and available labour in an already tight market. And then there's the added attraction and retention of skilled workers, the impact of FIFO, which all go to challenge many small businesses, and they're all having significant impact. It's interesting listening to Tim again today. I attended the Regional Australian Institute Regions Rising event on the 30th of March and listened to the findings of the paper. Some of the key takeaways from that event that haven't necessarily been mentioned today is that regional building is lagging behind population. 2010 to 2022, an average of 76,500 people moved to the regions, while the building approvals declined for 5 of those years. I guess that just gives us the message that regional housing shortage has been accumulating over a number of years. Regional price growth is exceeding metro. As an example, Augusta Margaret River's median house price is now greater than the Perth median. Collie was noted as a place of significant growth in June quarter 2021. Dardanup was featured as having the 3rd lowest vacancy rate in WA, and these are just sort of highlighting areas that you wouldn't necessarily think were going to be so significantly impacted. Government programs increasing migration, working from home, the flexibility that that offers, and long-term low interest rates are also key demand drivers. Private industry views working from home as a key value proposition for employees and expect the workplace flexibility to continue, and that will motivate people into the regions as well. So we see that as continuing to sustain that demand. Diversity in housing options is a growing demand, and different markets require different responses. Demand for rental accommodation within the region is significantly outstripping supply, as we know, with vacancy rates effectively at 0. The latest REWA stats, April 2022, show the Perth vacancy rate at 1.2%, while Bunbury sits at 0.04 and Busselton at 1. One of the consequences of this has been a significant spike in rents to make them amongst the highest in the state, particularly in the Busselton and Margaret River areas. With the high cost of rent and general lack of rental stock, it has been increasingly difficult to attract workers due to the lack of available housing and other accommodation. And impacts are also being felt in relation to tourist accommodation, with workers, and that's particularly in Bunbury at the moment, occupying this due to no or very few alternative options. So we all know housing shortages are due to a whole raft of factors. I've given a few, but there's the delays in construction, the completion of new dwellings, the shortage of skilled workers, the supply chain, as I mentioned. There's the Airbnb effect, which reduces the supply of long-term rental housing, increased interstate travel, absorbing short-term rentals, and purchase of rental properties, which are being taken up by owner-occupiers instead. And then there is the constraints associated with bringing land to market. My background is in planning and land development, and I'm acutely aware of those constraints, particularly in terms of infrastructure provision. And overall, options for lower priced accommodation have dried up across the region. Solutions and innovative thinking, my next heading, I was going to say headline. So almost all of the LGAs in the Southwest have approached the Southwest Development Commission in recent times in asking us to lead on the regional housing issues that they're confronted with. And on the back of some of the early discussions with the LGAs, I hosted a roundtable discussion with representatives from the City of Busselton, Shire of Augusta Margaret River, and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. And over a relatively short meeting, it was quite incredible the broad range of options and innovative thinking that came from the group. Just an example, a bit of a summary of some of those potential solutions. First one was the opportunity for government to collaborate with key stakeholders and to provide a coordinated approach to addressing these issues. Provision of a range of accommodation types. So I think it's an important takeaway that there isn't one size that fits all in this space, and in terms of finding a solution. But there are options available, and some of those that came up, growers building a second dwelling on a rural holding that's capable of accommodating up to 10 people and serviced by septic systems. So you don't have to go through all those normal rezonings, all those approvals. For a grower who's building that house, he knows he's going to have harvest each year. So it is a reusable form of accommodation. And then there's the nature-based camping on farms serviced by mobile ablutions and kitchens. Promotion of latent holiday homes for rental accommodation was one. Probably a little bit tricky, but you know, there are some people that have holiday homes that don't use them that often, and whether there's the option of encouraging them to get them to the rental market. A big one that I believe has some potential, and I know the City of Busselton is already doing this sort of thing, and it's providing greater flexibility in planning regulations, unlocking red tape and streamlining approvals. Another one, ensuring the longer term availability of the supply of zoned and planned land through strategic planning and opportunities associated with, and then there's the opportunities associated with Crown land to provide flexibility in land supply options. Also, the opportunity to work with the Indigenous settlement groups to look at opportunities for land development. They do have significant parcels of land, and it's certainly worthwhile having those conversations to see if there is opportunity there for them as well. And then the alternative or relaxed servicing requirements. So instead of continually imposing the gold-plated requirements of metropolitan standards within residential development in the regions, that is something that has been suggested should be looked at. At that meeting, the city advised that a significant issue is that housing is not being completed or not being completed in a timely fashion. So in the 18 months to December 2021, 1,100 homes were started within the city of Busselton. Only 600 notices of completion were issued. So you had twice as many starts as completions. And the delays that were cited by the city all related to supply chain issues. So what is the state doing? So contrary to some negative media, there is a lot happening in this space. I won't go into great detail, but there is the SHERP, which is the state's, I can't remember, I know the acronym, but I can't remember what the, but the state has provided $444 million as part of its COVID economic recovery. There's the collaboration with other RDCs. So each of the RDCs, we are getting together on a regular basis, and we're trying to form up a response and a lot of commonality with the issues. And then, as you would have probably seen, the state budget announcements, and a lot of the components of that were about, assisting with the housing supply options. So I hope I've done this a bit of justice. I could talk about this subject all day. I did have 20 pages, but I'm down to 5. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Now we're meant to have a Q&A panel now, but we're running slightly late. We've got 4 minutes for Q&A. So I'm not sure whether we want to have panelists, or if there's people with pressing issues, maybe they can go to the microphones, and then we can pass the microphones to whoever you wish to direct the question at. No questions, all right. Just made up some time. All right, well. Who would you like to direct your question to?
Whoever wants to answer it. And it's kind of more of a observation, I guess, than a question. But, this thing's been, I guess, playing out over the last 2-3 years, what's been happening. And obviously we're in kind of unprecedented times. So watching it unfold as a small business owner myself was interesting. Just talking about the home availability issue, there are a lot of Australians, of course, back home at the moment, whereas prior they were all overseas holidaying. They had homes overseas, so they are back home now and they're using their house again. At some point in time, those people are going to go back overseas. So if they leave the country, they go back to their European residence or wherever it may be. you know, the foreigners, the tourists that do come into the country, they generally get hotel style accommodation. So I'd expect at that point in time, there will be some houses available as well. It sounds like we're trying to fix the issue straight away. Like, is it as big as an issue as we think it is? Like longer term, because some of these things that have been playing out, they may auto-correct as well. Like we do have to obviously fix the problems that we've currently got, because there are people that, you know, almost becoming gentrified in the region. So, and I guess another point as well is with the mandates being dropped recently in WA, there was a lot of people that were put out of employment. For me, it seems like the elephant in the room. How many people are going to be going back to the workforce?
Who's best placed to answer that question? Now, some very, very, very good points in terms of short-term pressure with people coming back to live here, but I think we're probably going to find there's going to be more people that are going to want to live here because we've weathered the storm quite well. But is there any of our presenters who'd like to make a comment on that?
I can make a quick comment on the workforce one. That the signs currently are that the labour force is getting bigger. So people are one of the highest participation rates nationally now ever. So they're pretty strong signs that people are keen to get back into the labour force, mandates and closed borders notwithstanding. And on the housing, I think you're quite right to point out some of these short-term things like people saying, I'm not moving back to overseas. I think the other big short-term thing for us, as I was saying earlier, we really, when people start moving as normal from regions to cities, that will start to free up more space in the really short term. And we're just starting to see signs of that now. That flow's kind of been a bit stalled over the last 18 months. It's looking like it might be starting to come back. And if we do get that normal flow resuming, people leaving their regional place, going to a city for a while, there's a lot of back and forth. But that holding back that flow has jammed up those rental markets in particular. So if that starts to open up, then yeah, we should get a few more in the short term properties available for rent.
Yeah, I might just add to that as well, though, that yeah, those short-term pressures should start to sort of ease up with that changing population dynamics, and also with interest rates going up, that should start to at a very minimum dampen those really rapid runaway rates of price growth. But I think, you know, because the pressures are so acute in regions, the sort of potential declines in housing prices are probably going to be limited. And, you know, what I spoke to in the presentation was that there are these cyclical drivers to the current pressures, and they're important, but there are also, the shortages are underscored by these structural challenges as well. And so, you know, that's the key for policy, you know, for policy to be designed to deal with those actual issues and deal with them in that place-based way that we've been really keen on.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry.
Does anyone from business have anecdotal information about workforce post-mandate?
Does any business people here have any evidence of workforce returning?
Just a quick one. A quick one from the border management perspective, when I get the microphone right. One of the key points I forgot to mention, Australia's border reopened 15th of December 2021. So we are already seeing backpackers, students, migrants, skilled workers coming back on shore. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not a flood. It's probably a trickle at this point, but you know, basically mid-December 2021, the borders reopened. So we are going to see pressures alleviate in the short to medium term.
No more questions? All right, well, we'll head to morning tea for about 20 minutes. If we can be back here at 11:30, please.
So, yeah.